because Core's camera is pretty cool, but when you're making a game, sometimes you want a camera that feels a bit more unique and does cool things for polish. So, what is a camera? There's first-person cameras, third-person cameras, and there's like fixed position cameras, like where a camera's looking at something. But what is it technically in Core? So, why is this not? Okay, so in Core, we have this object here, under client context, third-person camera. And it has a whole bunch of settings on it. This attached to local player, position offset, adjustable distance, minimum distance. So what it all boils down to is that a camera orbits around the position. And that position by default is the player when you have this attached to local player ticked. It has a rotation and it has a distance from that rotation. So, when you have a new game and you just hit play, the camera is orbiting around the player. There's also a field of view. So if you increase the field of view, where is that sneaky little property? There it is. So if you make that like 150 and you hit play, you're like really zoomed out, like, whoa, what's going on? I'm going really fast, or am I? So common confusions about cameras. Cameras have a lot of settings. And I came from a Unity background, and like in Unity, you just have a camera, and the camera renders from the position and rotation of the camera object. But Core's camera is more advanced because it's based on a camera set up in Unreal, and it's got this thing called a spring arm. But it provides a lot of really useful functionality and gets you started with like a camera that feels good. The player always has a camera if you don't include one. So what that means is if I actually delete this camera and hit play, I've still got a camera. There's just, if I ask, hey, what's player get active camera, it's going to return nil. But you always have a camera. And if you have multiple cameras and you hit play, you only ever have one camera at once. Like they're not all active.
Does the one that's higher in the hierarchy it become priority, or is it always the lowest one that takes priority?
Good question. Let's test it. So this is the newest one I've created, and it's got users default, and I guess let's use the top one. Well, that is 120. Oh, maybe it picks it at random.
It seems like it.
But if you have multiple cameras, what you want to do is untick this user's default. Like, you should only have one camera with that property ticked. I thought it would have used the newest one, but...
Yeah.
Anyway, so... Core's camera is more advanced, has a spring arm. Player always has a camera. Each player has a default camera, an override camera, and the active camera that is currently used. So this is something I found confusing when I first started, was that I was like, okay, how do I just get the player's camera? What's default camera? What's override camera? What's active camera? Hang on, I'm just going to close my door for a sec. And I'm back. So I guess I don't have the core API open, but the default camera is your base camera. It's the camera that the player currently has. But then when you use set override camera, it gives you another camera that you can interpolate towards. But if you ask what is the active camera, it's either the default camera or the override camera if you've set one. But sometimes you might be like, oh, I want to like do a gun that I right click and it zooms in. So I'm going to modify the default camera, because if I'm in a cutscene and I've got an override camera, I don't want to mess with the override camera. You can also just get a camera reference, like if you have a script, I realize I'm creating a group, and you just drag a camera reference, like you can get the specific camera that way. The position of the camera will have no effect if it's set to player. So this is the thing that confused me a lot at first. Like I was like, okay, so I've got my camera and I'm gonna like position it over here. But like when I hit play, the camera's just stuck on the player. But if I unattach it, and let's put something in the scene so we can actually. I'm going to put a volleyball over here. Scale that up. Oh, this is a really cool thing you can do with the camera, by the way. Like if you have an object selected and you line it up in the view, you can right click and go move selected object to camera and align orientation. And now, like the camera object, if I just press V, the camera's here. But I hit play and it's like, well, that's not where I put it. And that's because there's all these other settings you gotta tweak. And there's this thing here called base rotation mode. And if you change that to camera and you hit play, we set the field of view back to 90 because I was messing with it. There. So look at this soccer ball, volleyball even, from here, and I hit play. It's roughly the right position. Anyway, let's just continue with the presentation. The rotation of the camera will have no effect unless base rotation mode is set to camera. So that's what I just did then in core, right? Like I unticked attach to local player and I set base rotation mode to camera. And we also did that default thing. Some things to know. Another thing I found very confusing was like, you see this term look rotation all over the place. Like you got player settings and it says look relative, view relative, like there's view and look. So what is look? So every player, do I cover that at this point? Yeah. A look direction rotates as the player moves the mouse. The look rotation is independent of a camera. So every player has like a direction that they're looking, but whether you have a camera or not, it's not part of the camera. So we just set this back to where it was. So right now, when I'm looking around, see how like my head moves? That's because it's using the look rotation. And under camera, it says look angle. But I originally thought look angle was like part of the camera, but it's not. The look angle is something that each player has that represents the direction they're facing. And when you say that you want the base rotation to be the look angle, you're actually saying, I want the camera to face the same direction that the player is looking. And it's just a rotation. But we'll see some examples of that later. A quick look at all the properties. There's a lot of properties. We already sort of did that. Attached to local player. When a camera is attached to a player, the position of the core object for the camera has no effect. It'll orbit around the position of the player or the camera socket. Another thing to mention is like, if you don't tick attached to local player, that look angle variable no longer works. Like your camera is going to have a rotation of 0, 0, 0. Which I put here. This is the problem with writing this a week ago. So when you've got like rotation, offset, and free control, these are these extra things here, rotation, offset. So if I'm like, I'm going to make everything slightly tilted by 45 degrees, and I hit play, you can see the camera's rotated 45 degrees. But like the world's not rotated 45 degrees, just like the camera orbiting my character is. And then you also have this thing called free control. So if I don't use the look angle, but I activate free control, and pitch is doing this, looking like up and down, and yaw is looking left and right. So if I say I want a maximum pitch of -45, a minimum of -45 and a maximum of 45, and I hit play, like, see, I can, I've still got the rotation offset, hang on. Now I can look only a little bit. It's gone a bit weird. That is because I've set the base rotation mode to camera. I was meant to set it to none. There we go. So now, like, can you see that it's gone out of sync? Like where I'm looking and where the character's looking doesn't match. That's because the free control of a camera has like nothing to do with the look angle. It's its own separate thing. And if you ever want to determine what the rotation of the camera is, it's like the base rotation times the rotation offset times free control. And that was the thing I just showed then. Okay, so position offset. That's a fun one. Just get this all back to what it was. So I got a camera that's orbiting my character, and if I give it a position offset of like 100 on the Y, it's going to move it to the right. But you'll see that like as I orbit the character, like the character is always staying on the left side of the screen. Or maybe you want the character to be slightly lower down on the screen. So if we lifted it by 50, then you've got like a higher up perspective. But when I look down, you can see that like the character's head is near the bottom of the screen. It's not going to like center the camera on the player when you look down. It's all relative to the angle that you're looking. Oh, just click Steam by accident. Then there's this property, adjustable distance, which if you tick adjustable distance, it means you can use your mouse wheel to zoom out and zoom in. And if we place a wall, that's just gonna use, it's gonna make a really terrible wall. You'll see that like when I get close to a wall, the camera doesn't go through the wall. But if I use the mouse wheel, it goes a bit weird. And there's this extra setting on the camera. That's what time we are. 20 minutes in. There's this extra setting that's called position offset springs. And if you have that unticked and you zoom in and out, wait. This does not demonstrate this very well. Let's make this 0 and this 800. Okay, so like when I zoom in really close, see how like I'm over my shoulder? But if I have position offset springs ticked and I zoom in, oh, it does the same thing. I got that wrong. Sorry, what it changes is this. Like when I get close, see how when I go close to the wall, the camera is going inside my head. But if I don't have that ticked and I go close to a wall, see how I go off to the side of the screen? So that was a property that used to always confuse me, but what it does is when the spring arm of the camera hits a wall, it pushes the camera so that it remembers the offset. So if you have position offset springs ticked, then the camera is going to go closer towards the pivot. It's going to like scale down the offset. I don't know. Like I don't know how to describe it. That's just what it does. Do you want to end up getting closer to your character or further away when this happens? Or this?
I think I prefer the first option.
Okay. I'm really sorry if this is all super boring. I'm just going over like all the things. So that was that. Some things to know. So you've got a lot of the functions that you'd expect to find in the camera are actually in the player, and that's because like the player always has a camera. So if you use local player get view world rotation, it gives you the rotation of the active camera in world space. And that's important to know that it's of the active camera because you've got like your default camera and your override camera. And if you use get world position, it gives you the position of the current active camera. And also, it's kind of like the position of the camera on the previous frame. So that's just like a thing to keep in mind. Sometimes you might notice like a 1 frame lag, but don't worry about it. Whereas the function get look world rotation is getting the rotation that the player is looking. So if you remember, I was going on about like how there's a look angle to every player. That's the difference between like view world rotation and look world rotation. Is the look world rotation is the direction or rotation that the player's avatar is looking at, whereas the view world rotation is the direction or rotation of the camera itself. So if you have a camera and it's like slightly tilted or something, then view world rotation is going to get the rotation with the tilt, whereas the look world rotation won't. Also, the look world rotation is like 1 frame ahead of the view world rotation, so I sometimes use that to do predictions and stuff. On top of that, there's also a thing called facing angle. So for instance, if you go to the player and there's this thing called facing mode, and you say face movement, so I'm facing to the right, but my camera is looking forward. And if you ever want to know what direction the player is facing, the only way to do that is to just use local player or the player reference get world rotation. And it'll give you a rotation that's what the player's rotation is. It's the only way to know the true facing angle. Because when you use a setting like face aim always, why did I do that in play mode? Like, you can see that my character is just sliding on the spot and facing the direction that I'm moving the camera. But if I use face aim when active, that means that the character is not going to rotate, but the head's going to rotate. But like my torso is not rotating, but as soon as I move, then I rotate. That's what being active means. If an ability is being active, or you're moving, or you're jumping, or you're doing something that's active. So the look rotation affects where the player's head is looking, except when you have your character's facing mode set to movement. I don't know why that is. I sort of think it might be a bug, but if you ever want to make your character look at something and you have a camera that's not looking, you're not using the look angle, you can like use the look rotation to control where the head's looking, but you don't usually do that. Now, in terms of what the client machine and what the server machine knows, you can access the world rotation of any player. But if you try to get the look rotation or the view rotation or the view position, you can only get your own characters, like you can only get local player. If you have a reference to another player and you try to do it, it won't work. It just gives you 0. But the server knows every player's look angle, every player's view rotation, and every player's view position. So you can kind of use that to like determine on the server if a player is looking at another player. But if you're trying to do something on the client, you're stuck with just using get world rotation. If a player isn't using the look angle for its base rotation, then you must change the rotation of the camera or modify current picture current yaw. I don't know why I even mentioned that. Also, the client can actually modify the look world rotation. So if you want to like make the player look at a specific thing, like look at a target, in a client script you can use set look world rotation, and you can use that to do like aim assist or automatic aiming. The movement control mode. God, we're like 30 minutes in. So on the player, there's this option for look relative, view relative, facing relative, and fixed axis. And what that does is if the movement control mode is set to none, you don't move at all. If it's set to look relative, then you're going to move relative to where you're looking. So if your camera is set to look angle, it's fine. You're gonna, if you look this way and you press forward, you walk forward. But if I get my camera and I add a rotation offset on the Y by like Z actually by 90 degrees, and I press forward now, I'm actually moving to the left. And it's kind of weird. Whereas if I change this to be view relative, and then I press forward on the keyboard, I'm moving this way. But you can see I'm looking to the left, but I'm moving forward, which is a bit wonky. Facing relative is kind of a funny one, because what this actually does is gives you almost like old school Tomb Raider controls. If I press forward, I go forward. If I press right, oh, wait. Sorry, forgot to change another setting. If I make myself face my movement and I press right, I spin on the spot. So I'm pressing like right, forward, right, forward. And it just kind of reminds me of like the old classic Tomb Raider games where you couldn't control the camera at all, but you could like turn left, turn right, move forward, move backwards. Put those back. There's a property called look sensitivity. So when you're looking around with your mouse, if you change that to like 2, it's going to look around twice as fast. If you change it to 0.1, it's going to slow it down. And since I guess I'm kind of running out of time, I was going to make an example of like aim assist, but I'll just post some code in Discord if people are interested in that, because I'm going a bit over time. Abilities. Okay, 2 slides left. Jeez, it's really did become a TED Talk. When you're messing with a camera, sometimes it gets confusing because you'll try to use an ability and you'll like aim in the wrong direction. But there is this property called ability aim mode where you can find view relative or look relative. And I'm going to be using that later on when I do my little example. Okay. Zoom in camera. Okay, time to actually do some coding. Sorry that was a long talk about all the settings, but I just kind of wanted to explain them all. So at the moment we got a third-person camera, and let's write some code. Let's just do a new script and call it messing with the camera. And that was the script I wrote previously. Add a tick function. What should we do first? Let's try not having the camera be attached to the player. And we'll use free control. And we'll just position it here. So now I can run around and I can look around, but my camera's not moving. So let's write some code. Let's get the local player. Use your game get local player. And we'll get our camera by just doing local camera equals script.parent. I'm being lazy, but I can do that because my script is under a camera. And anybody that's using Visual Studio Code, you can do this @type camera. And now when I type camera dot, it gives me like all the functions that I would use with a camera. If I don't have that, and I type camera dot, it doesn't filter it down. So it thinks it's a core object, not a camera. So I like to put little type notations in where possible to help me out, because I don't always remember all the API. So let's get the local player position. Just do local player position and camera, set world position to player position. And let's just see what happens. Okay, now that I move around, the camera is following the player. That's cool. Let's smooth it out. Let's change this to camera. Move to player position. Player position with a duration of 0.2 seconds. Now it's got this nice kind of like smoothing going on. So that's already something a bit different to what a regular game that uses the built-in camera stuff does. Let's what else can we do to the camera? Let's set. Oh, now I remember what I'm doing. So that's just like how I can move the camera around manually. But let's say we have a target. So I'm just gonna get a animated human. Is there one with clothes?
Everyone likes to pick on Carl.
Carl?
Yeah.
Is it with a K or C-A-L?
K.
There we go. Skeleton. Let's have this as a target. So what I've just done there is I've dragged a reference to this core object onto this script as a custom property. Now I'm just going to paste that into my script. And now I'm going to get a position that's between Carl and the player. So I'm going to do local Carl position. Yeah. Get world position. Local center equals Carl position plus player position divided by 2. I'll put that in brackets. And now I will move it to the center. There's Carl. There it is. So now, you know, me and Carl were sort of both on the screen, but as I run away, I can no longer see myself, and that's because the camera is between Carl and me, but the distance is such that I don't, you know, see both of them at the same time. So let's rectify that. Let's find out how far we are. So local distance equals Carl position take player position dot size with the distance, not size squared, size. And then do camera current distance equals distance plus 50. So now when I get close to Carl, the camera zooms in, and when I get far away, we have something a bit different, something for like targeting. And let's get like a player binding. I guess I should use like the new action hook, right? So it's like what action pressed event connect function layer action. Oh, actually, I'll do input is action held local player. What's right click called?
I'd like to say aim, but I might be wrong. Left is shoot.
Aim is right mouse button. Yeah, let's go with aim. So I'm gonna say local is aiming equals this, and then if is aiming, then we'll do this thing with the camera. Otherwise, we'll just set the camera position to the player position. Let's get our player position up here. And let's set like the camera distance to what it was before, like 300. Was it? I think it was 400. And I've got an error. Woo!
Line 33.
Code that I forgot to finish writing. Okay, so now like I've got a camera that's very similar to the default core one, and then when I right click, it does that, and it's a bit janky. And the reason why is because of the camera distance suddenly changing over one frame from 400 to distance plus 50. So that's like, we can just smooth that out and go local distance smoothed equals 400 to begin with. Nah, let's just set it to camera current distance. And then we can move this to here. Now, should I explain what a lerp is, or do people know what a lerp is? So, what do you reckon, Amanda?
Go for it.
Okay, I'm just gonna code it. So let's say we're gonna have like local target distance, and we'll set it to distance plus 50. Otherwise, this will be 400. And then we're gonna go distance smoothed equals core math lerp from distance smoothed to target distance by 20 times time delta. All you have to know is that like if you're trying to make a number move towards another number really smoothly, like you write this. Lerping is awesome. It's just kind of a weird way of using it. But now when I right click, see, it was like a bit smoother. I say a lot. So let's give the character a gun. In gun. Alright, they're getting a shotgun because I was meant to put basic pistol. Now here's our first problem. I want to look at this target, but when I shoot, I'm shooting where my crosshair is. Which isn't very good. So let's say I wanted to make like auto aim. So if I shoot, I'm always going to shoot at the skeleton. I'm never going to like shoot at the center of the screen. You can go into third person player settings and there's this ability aim mode, and it says it's relative to the view. And if you move the mouse over, it says view relative. Ability aim is calculated from the camera origin along the camera forward direction. Look relative. Ability aim is calculated from the player's eye position along the player look direction. All that means is that if you have it set to view relative, you're going to be shooting at like the center of your screen, what pixel that hits. But if you use look angle, then you'll be shooting at the direction that look angle on the local player is. And what we're going to do is we're going to cheat. We're going to set the player's look rotation by doing local player set look world rotation. And now we need a rotation. For fun, let's just make an empty rotation. So we're just going to look out towards x equals 0, and you'll see that as I move around, I'm just facing that way, right? Like, now I want to look at Carl, not look at nothing. So you're probably familiar with like making a rotation and specifying like an x, y, z. You know, like in here, rotation is an x and a y and a z. But there's a useful function that can get a rotation for you from a forward axis and an up axis. So if we get, I'll just put a little comment here. This code is getting messy. If we get Carl's position, you know, let's move Carl out of here. There. Okay. What time are we at? 15 minutes. Okay. If we get a vector, I'm gonna draw this in Paintbrush. If we have Carl the Spooky Skeleton here, and my player over here, I cannot draw with the mouse to save my life. We have player position and Carl position. And what we want to do is get a vector that points like this. So the way you do that is you get the position of Carl and you subtract the position of the player. If you're ever like trying to get a direction, it's always like the thing you want to look at, subtract where you're looking from. So we'll do that. We'll just go local look forward direction equals Carl position, take player position. And we can just plug that into the rotation as our forward vector, because that vector is a direction from the player to Carl. So remember, it is like to from, if you're big on using vector maths. And then for the up direction, we're just going to use vector3.up. With look world rotation, it doesn't really matter that much, but you generally want the up vector to always be up, otherwise the camera might be like rolling. So now that we've done that, I'll get rid of this. Now I should be like centered on Carl. But now something weird's happening. You can't see it because I'm playing it, but like if I look this way and I press forward, I'm running forward. And if I press back, I'm running back. And let's say that's not what I wanted. Like I didn't want pressing forward to actually, when I'm looking that way, I want forward to move me in a different direction. Then I go into player settings and there's look control mode, look relative, and change this to view relative. Now if I use view relative, then I'm pressing forward right now and I'm moving into the screen. Now let's test my gun. I'm gonna shoot. I'm aiming in the right direction. Let's try shooting. Nope. It didn't work. Why didn't it work? So the reason it didn't work was there's another setting. We've got ability aim mode, view relative. We need that to be look relative. And then sometimes there's even settings on here with cast, where facing mode is aim. If this is set to movement, then you're going to be changing your target data, but it should work fine for a shotgun. So I'm going to run over here, pick up my gun, and shoot poor Carl in the head without even aiming. And that was basically all I wanted to show for that, except I guess we've got like this crosshair that makes no sense. So we can get rid of that crosshair by just going to our weapon and unticking reticule type, and just go none. Now we'll shoot at Carl. I'm pressing right click to do this. And yeah, that's a thing. I'm not going to code this one from scratch, but if anyone was like interested, this is actually kind of similar. Just got this script called top-down camera. The camera is set up to be to have a position offset, but actually that doesn't matter. Sorry, it's base rotation is the camera, and it's rotated negative 90 degrees on the y-axis, which makes it look down. You can see the gizmo. The camera is looking. Now, where is the camera? Yeah, the camera's looking down, and I just in the script, I'm setting the look world rotation of the player, and I'm setting a position offset and a rotation offset to get this effect where, like, when I move the mouse, the camera's panning a bit and tilting. If anybody wants the code for that, I can send it. But yeah, I don't know. Does anyone have any questions or? Line 33. He codes in his accent.
I'm sure some people would want the project, so that would be helpful. Do you have the one you coded the other day with the reticle?
Oh yeah, that's
that was
here.
pretty cool.
Yeah, that was what I was trying to create, but
And that reticle shrinks or stays a certain size, doesn't it?
yeah, it changes size. Yeah, just for let's open up the code to just talk about that for a second. Wow, I was so lazy with this that I actually wrote the cursor code inside the camera code. You shouldn't do that. You should, write separate scripts for things. But here I'm getting the screen position. Wait, what am I doing? Crosshair. Oh yeah, so I'm finding out the screen position of the target. UI get screen position, and that gives me a result. But I need to actually check whether that result exists, because sometimes if you rotate a certain way, like, it'll be off screen. And when it's off screen, it doesn't have a position, it just returns nil. Sinno's asking how good, bad are these tick functions in terms of camera smoothness on the server? Anything specific to avoid a tick when working with a camera, apart from task.wait, of course. So these scripts are just running on the client, and if you use a tick function, it's going to run once every frame. You can use task.wait to make the tick happen every couple of frames, but because you've only got one camera, it's worth having it tick every frame so that you get like a smooth update of things. Trigger overlap the switches to the override for first person with a boolean.
Oh, that's in response to Barge's question. Barge wants to
Oh,
know how to go from third person to first person if you walk inside a building.
oh right, yeah. So I just make a new scene. Got a camera switch. Let's just look in core content for first person camera settings. So we've got third person, we've got first person. And I'm going to cheat a little bit and just rip this out, de-instance it, delete it. So now I've got two cameras, a first person camera and a third person camera and a first person camera. I want the first person camera to not be the default. And then I'm going to make a trigger. Let's make a group first. You know, let's put a house in. let's get like our craftsman house. Pop that there. If I hit play, I might enter the house. And let's make a trigger. Let's make a little thing called switch camera. Right click, create gameplay objects trigger. Quick thing I sometimes do when I'm too lazy to grab the gizmos, I just place my camera here, right click and go move selected objects, camera position only, and then, you know, I've got it roughly where I want it, and then I can just drag these little handles and awkwardly resize them. So I think this house only has like one entrance and one exit, so it's going to put one trigger here and call it the exit trigger, and then make another trigger called enter trigger. Space them apart a little bit. Then I'll make a script and call it enter house camera example. Give it a reference to both of these triggers, exit trigger, enter trigger. And just for the sake of simplicity, you know what, I'll do a search. I'll do a search to find it. So we'll do, oh, I made a mistake. I need to put this inside a local context. Yeah. So I'm going to find the local player. And then I'm going to find my first person camera by using local first person camera equals world find by name. Now, there's a chance that this object won't exist yet because it's like inside a client context, and maybe this will run before this. So if you want to be a good programmer, you might do like a loop and be like local first person camera equals nil, and then while first person camera is equal to nil, do first person camera equals find object by name, and then print, woo, we found the camera. Woo, we found the camera. But you can also just be lazy and just do this and then put a task.wait in. Oh, I made a mistake. I would need to put task.wait at the bottom here, otherwise this would loop forever and crash the game. So you actually do that twice, I guess. Like you check it, and then while it's nil, if it's not nil, then try to find it again, but do a task.wait like that. Or you can make a function that does it for you, but for keeping this simple, I'm just going to do a task.wait. This is why it's easy to just use custom properties. You just wait for custom property and it's all good. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll just be like, if that is equal to nil, then error could not find camera return. Actually, I think error does a return. Wow, I spent all that time just writing 4 lines of code that don't do anything. So let's get those custom properties for our triggers. And let's do a function on enter exit Oh god, why have I named these badly? Exit and enter. They're going to do on enter, enter trigger, on enter, exit trigger. Entrance. On.
Isn't that what they're called in Unity?
Yeah. On begin overlap. Wait. When this dot begin overlap event. Okay, so I could just do. You know what? I'm just going to do an inline function. Player. No. Trigger. Player. So what that means is when you do a binding to an event, you need to call connect as well. What? When you do a binding to an event, you can provide a function, or you can do what's called an anonymous function. So I'm doing an anonymous function here, because I can't think of a good name for my function. I guess it would be like on begin overlap exit trigger, but like, yeah. So I've done a function, I've connected it up, and I'm going to make another function for my enter trigger. And I'm going to just check that the, let's not call that player, let's call that other. So trigger is this trigger, and other is the thing that's entered this trigger. So I want to check if other is equal to local player, then I'm going to do local player, set override camera to first person camera. But if I got this the wrong way around. This is when I enter the enter trigger, I want to set it to first person. When I enter the exit trigger, I want to set it back to what it was. So I'm going to clear override camera. Yeah, whatever, will run. So now when I go in here, now I'm in first person mode. And if I run back out again, I'm not. Now, you might have noticed that my hair was clipping through. There's a thing that you can do called local player head, isn't it?
Yeah, like head self head or something like that.
Yeah, self.
No, maybe not.
Hey, what? Maybe it's visible. Is visible to self. Well, I'll do this. I'll make is visible to self be false for a first person, and then is visible to self be true. I could have sworn there was a variable to hide and show the head specifically. Yeah, so now I'm in first person, but I can't see my legs, so that kind of sucks. Let's no. I gotta teach myself this. I gotta teach myself to open up the script helper. This is a useful window where you can see all the things about a player, and then I can actually narrow this down to head is headshot.
Yeah, I could only see.
Wow, there's not actually like,
Is it a
because I can do that.
Actually,
It's a property here, show head to self. If I untick that, then I've got no head.
yeah.
I guess that's the best you can do. Well, no head. So that's how you can change from
Cool.
first person to third person. Another thing you could do is if you had like, just make a new scene again.
Got a question from Sino.
Oh, yep.
So he wants to know that if you enter a building, how you could from top down view, how you could handle hiding like walls that go invisible in some games, so you can kind of see.
Yeah. So for that, we'll have to actually use local context. This will be a cool little demonstration. Let me think. What's a good Should I use Craftsman House? It's got quite a lot of parts. They've all got a lot of parts. But I'll use Craftsman House. Why not? So the third person camera, let's give it a bit more distance, like make it adjustable, 900. So what always happens is when something gets in the way of the player and the camera always like ends up coming forward. So make a script called hide things close to camera. Let's put our entire house inside a local context. And we're gonna have to remove the doors because these doors are all like set up to have door scripts and they'll complain. Or do they? First floor patch. I'm just gonna hit play and see if anything errors. Okay. Let's do a. Did I really call this new script 3? Hide. Yeah, new script 3. Great. Okay. Local player equals game get local player function tick. Now what we want to do is find all the core objects inside this local context and work out if a sphere cast from the player back to the camera hits any of them. So we're just gonna we'll put our local context in here. And we'll find all the children by find descendants by type. Static mesh. Then in a tick we'll get the world position of the player and camera position. For this I'm just going to use local player get view world position. Then I'm going to do world sphere cast all. Start position is going to be the player position. The end position is going to be the view position. And the parameters, radius is going to be, say 100. And the params, we're going to say ignore players equals true and check objects equals children. So this is going to do a sphere cast and it's going to filter like what objects we're actually checking. So we're only going to be checking for static meshes inside children. The local results equals this. And we'll do a loop over all the results. We'll use, well, we'll make it faster. We'll use pairs. It's not, they don't need to be in order. If anyone's wondering what the difference between pairs and iPairs are, pairs loops over every key in your table This is a table of results with the key being number and the value being a hit result. It's going to loop over every key and value, but it's not going to do it in any order. The order is kind of arbitrary. If you use iPairs, then it's going to loop everything in order. Like it's going to check 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. But iPairs is slower because it's kind of sorting the data as it loops over it. So that's why I'm using pairs in this case, because we're probably going to have a lot of objects. And then we'll do other visibility equals visibility force off, and other collision equals, wait. Oh, no, this should be results. Local other equals results dot other. And other is a core object, so collision equals collision force off. Now, if I just run that, I think it's going to make like parts of the house disappear. Hide things when close to the camera needs to be inside a local context because it is only running on the computer. Okay, let's see what happens. It's probably going to make parts of the house disappear as I run. Or it just doesn't work at all. Brilliant. View position. What did I do wrong? It's printing. Local context. Okay, I've got another idea. I will do view position equals player position plus local player. Get view world, no, get look world rotation times vector 3 dot forward times negative, was my camera distance? $900. If this works, I'll explain what it does. Please work, please work, please work. Why is it not working? Find descent. Oh my frickin'. Oh, the rage.
I do
S.
that so often. Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Because of the sheer size of this, I need to actually make this like 2000. Okay. Got a very big house here. Okay, what's going on? Oh, because I'm setting collision off, I need to turn camera collision off. Yay!
Nice. That's great.
Except they don't reappear, so then what I need to do is keep a list of hidden children. And add this as a key. Want it as a key? Or a value? I want it as a key. Yeah, I want it as a key, so I'm going to set result.other equals true. And I'm going to loop over all my results and remove any that will be hidden, set it to nil, and loop it again. These will be children that still exist. I will explain this when I figure it out. Hidden children result other. Hidden children results other. No. I want to loop the hidden objects as keys. So that's the first parameter. And then I want to do the opposite of this. Which will be other visibility. And there's always a chance that other could be invalid, so I'll do if object is valid. Camera collision, inherit. This is kind of bad because what if the object didn't have camera collision to begin with? Then it wouldn't need to be changed back to this. But it'll end up being a lot of code to get this perfect. So children. Okay, I loop over all the results and remove any that are already in the hidden children. And I set hidden residence, which is true. Do you reckon this will work? So other is true. Yeah, let's give it a whirl. Let's see if it errors. So it's hiding. Yay, they're reappearing. Look at that. No mistakes.
Nice.
Except it's hiding objects that I don't want to hide, because it's hiding the wall as I approach it. So what would be a good solution to that? Maybe checking the Z position of the object and check that it's higher than the player. You get all these objects. Oh, I can't be bothered.
I think that's great.
So, I'll write more code for you if you need something in particular, but that's how you can do something like what you were suggesting. And hey, another example of like why local context is cool, right?
I'm trying to use that for everything right now.
Now all we need is the capability to make stuff appear and disappear progressively. Like with fade in and fade out. So that's part of the problem is like you have all these objects that already have materials and like you'd have to make a custom material for it and you'd need to use a material that has transparency. It would be really cool if one day Core like gave the ability for every material to like dissolve or something, but I can't make that work with the house. It would be a challenging thing to do in any engine really. Some video games they use a trick where they'll like render the camera multiple times with like a different layer. Maybe there's a trick you can do using like a UI render texture thing, but yeah. Oh, I know. You could instead of hiding the visibility, you could do other scale to vector 3.1 times 0.0001 with a duration of 0.2. False because I wanted the white space. Let's see what that looks like. Yay! It looks terrible. You would want all those objects to have a pivot that's like centered, not in the corners, and they're not reappearing. So I'd need to store what their previous scale was. So I'd have to What would I have to do? Instead of setting this to true, I could set this to the original scale, but I don't know what the original. No, I'm not doing it anymore. I quit.
Yeah, that's good. Is there any last questions? Hopefully not.
Camera related, please.
Look. We need stencil support. That's what we need.
Oh yeah,
That'd be
stencils would
nice.
be awesome.
I think it was on the roadmap at one point.
Yeah. Was this actually the version that I did before? I've ended up with like 3 scenes with the same thing in it.
Would you be okay with sharing the project in the?
Yeah, absolutely.
Download?
I should probably clean it up a bit, but just in
Oh,
case I don't, I'm just gonna zip it up and send
yeah,
it.
yeah, that's absolutely
Camera
fine.
tests.
We've got a lot of thanks in here. Cool. Well, thanks again for Divide for the amazing presentation. It was awesome.
Thanks for having me.
No,
Sorry, it was a bit of a TED talk.
that was great. It just goes to show that combining the properties from the camera, the actual player settings, and doing a little scripting, you can get some kind of really cool effects with the camera going. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I hope people play around with it more. Like the camera that's in Core is really good because it's precise. I play a lot of Fortnite, and the camera like is very simple in it because what matters is where the crosshair is. But when I was playing Horizon Forbidden West, I noticed that when you look up and down, the camera shifts left and right. It looks very cinematic, but it makes aiming slightly harder. So
Yeah,
if there's all these tricks you can do to like smooth the camera out to make a more cinematic feeling, but it costs gameplay. So I think Core chose to make the camera simple because it favors gameplay, but you can totally do stuff to the camera to make a more cinematic thing. If you actually go into Core World, uh, am I still sharing the screen, by the way?
yeah. That's Sinnoh running along the beach, if I remember correctly.
Sarah claimed it was her. How do I get this back into window mode? Altus. Yes, and then Core World. Like, I wrote like a thing ages back. Oh, I guess I got to get my daily crate, right?
We have a
Let's find.
ritual. Our whole team does this every day at a certain time.
I didn't get 100,000. I only got a there. That settles the argument on the Discord, right? You'll notice like there's this little bit of polish with the camera that when I use the mouse to zoom in and out, it's like smooth. And if you look over here and the camera comes close and you look away, the camera zooms out. So a long time ago, I actually wrote like a bit of code that smoothed out the camera so that if the camera got in close and then went far away, it would zoom out. It wouldn't just like snap over one frame. And it ended up in Core World, just kind of
Nice.
cool. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
stop
that's it.
streaming now.
Thanks very much, Divide. It was great.
Thank you.